Last week, a community near where I live in Los Angeles County had a cell tower installed overnight at a fire station with no public notice, no public input, and in flagrant disregard of all local zoning rules, regulations, or environmental study impact reports. Despite the residents' jam-packed emergency meeting and backlash against the new uninvited cell tower, they have been unable to get it removed. We have been getting reports of this happening now all over Los Angeles County, the Bay Area of California, and even in other states like in Texas and Houston, New Mexico, New Jersey, and Colorado. This rollout will soon be all across the United States if nothing is done to stop it. Currently, 40% of Los Angeles, primarily the wooded and less populated areas, are blessedly cell tower radiation free. LA RICS, the sister agency to FirstNet, the federal agency where all this money is coming from, is promising to blanket the entire county of Los Angeles with 97% radiation saturation, leaving virtually no radiation-free areas left at all should this rollout be allowed to continue. This is all being done despite the Department of the Interior statement that cell tower radiation is killing birds, wildlife, and foliage. Well, it's doing that to birds, wildlife, and foliage. Imagine what it's doing to us. In fact, studies show a 350% increase in cancer when residents live or work within 1,500 feet of a cell tower for an average of 5 years. This carcinogenic military-grade surveillance program is being paid for through the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, which was essentially a gifting of our tax money to private corporations. Our local community in Los Angeles was originally told that under no circumstances would there be public hearings, public input, or due process, and that LA RICS and FirstNet were exempt from all local zoning rules, regulations, and environmental impact reports under the guise of Homeland Security. We hired a lawyer, filed a public information request of all emails between LA County and LA RICS, in addition to filing a Freedom of Information Act with Homeland Security. Within a short period of filing these two documents, our community was granted a public hearing, and implementation of the cell tower in our area has now been stalled. We then had a local community meeting with LA RICS, who threatened us with no emergency services at all if we did not allow for their carcinogenic, genotoxic cell tower infrastructure with blanketed surveillance of all of Los Angeles County to go into our neighborhood. You and your community need to know that that lowball threat tactic is illegal, since our tax dollars pay for firemen, sheriffs, police, and all other emergency services. So don't be intimidated if your community is also threatened with this lowball scare tactic. If you watch the link to the Washington, D.C. hearings with FirstNet that happened last week, you will see a flagrant disregard for cancer and other life-threatening health effects that both our federal representatives and FirstNet continually pretend do not exist. They are irresponsibly risking public health and safety in the name of public health and safety. Now that makes perfect sense, right? Well, actually it does, if you follow the money on this. The wireless industry spends approximately $100 million a year lobbying Congress and ends up with $12 billion of our tax money. Not a bad business deal for them. In fact, almost the entire board of FirstNet are some of the biggest names in the wireless and surveillance industry, but they also include the Director of Homeland Security and the Director of Department of Justice. You know, just to make sure they can get away with this taking of our constitutional rights to health, life, property, and privacy, and give them the ability to implement unwarranted surveillance on the entire United States of America. To give you an idea of who's really behind this carcinogenic surveillance scheme, Senator Rockefeller of the notorious Trilateral Commission was thanked at the below hearing for conceiving of the idea, and the first chairman of the board of FirstNet was Sam Jin, who also happens to be chairman of the board of Chevron for over a decade, the company that was recently slapped with a nearly $20 billion fine for contaminating the country of Ecuador and making whole villages sick with cancer and birth defects. Not unlike what the cell tower rollout promises to do for us. Not coincidentally, Sam Jim also happens to be chairman of the board of AirTouch and Vodafone. Other members of FirstNet also sit on the boards of many surveillance and wireless companies and also may benefit in some way from this enormous federal citizen tax dollar giveaway. Current FirstNet chairwoman Susan Swenson claimed at the hearing that she was doing all this work as chairman of the FirstNet board out of the goodness of her heart, but a cursory look at her background implies a slightly different story. Ms. Swenson was CEO and president of Cellular One president and COO of Pactel Cellular, which later became part of AirTouch Cellular, and was president of Leap Wireless before becoming COO of T-Mobile USA until becoming COO of a new startup, Amped Mobile. She also sits on a number of boards including Harmonic, a company specializing in surveillance-capable software and video systems, Novatel Wireless, Spirent Communications, and Wells Fargo. Many of these companies for which she was the CEO, president, or top executive for have been named in multiple brain cancer lawsuits, and some are even covering up their own studies showing evidence of cancer and other health effects from their wireless devices and infrastructures. When asked at the hearing what obstacles FirstNet was facing in its rollout, Ms. Swenson purposely neglected to mention the biggest obstacle of all, the fact that the firefighters and citizens who they protect do not wish to get cancer and other health effects in exchange for the gifting of our tax money to these companies. The International Association of Firefighters have issued a statement saying firefighters suffer debilitating brain fog when exposed to cell tower radiation, making it sometimes impossible for them to do their life-saving work. They also suffered from neurological illnesses and deadly cancers they attributed directly to the antennas on or near their fire stations. Based on peer-reviewed, published scientific data, the International Association of Firefighters has called for a halt to all new antennas and cell towers on or near their fire stations, just as our local Los Angeles Firefighters Union has recently called for. The LA Firefighters Union has also written numerous letters to their fire chief Terrazas and LA County Board of Supervisors stating their opposition to this rollout, but have been completely ignored. If you watch the FirstNet hearing below, Chief Bryant of the International Association of Fire Chiefs was asked to testify on behalf of FirstNet, and it would appear that the firefighters are in favor of this rollout. You need to know that there is a deep division amongst fire chiefs in executive upper management positions and the men and women of the Firefighters Union. Los Angeles Fire Chief Terrazas, who has acted against the wishes of the Firefighters Union of Los Angeles and in favor of LA RICS, is considered upper management and answers to this man, Union, the mayor of Lima, and Los Angeles supervisors. But the Firefighters Union President, Frank Lima, answers to these men and women, the actual firefighters, and not to our local politicians. Both our federal and local representatives continually ignore the fact that this is microwave radiation, a neurotoxin capable of genetic damage, and a Class 2B carcinogen that the World Health Organization says may cause cancer in humans. Now, why would our representatives be purposely ignoring public health and safety? Besides direct campaign contributions from the wireless industry, we can shed even a little more light on that question when we follow the money on LA RICS and FirstNet. If one cell tower equals $2,000 a month in revenue, and it's usually much higher, one monopole can hold 5 to 10 or more carriers. Let's conservatively say 5. So 5 times 2,000 equals $10,000 a month from one cell tower. 10,000 times 12 months, that's $120,000 a year. $120,000 a year times 231 monopoles in Los Angeles equals $27,720,000 extra a year minimum that LA County stands to receive from this rollout. That is an extraordinary conflict of interest. And once a cell tower is up, the law states that anyone can hang whatever they want on it. These wireless companies would love to get into sensitive and previously protected and inaccessible areas, which, using Homeland Security, may allow them to infiltrate. According to Fierce Wireless magazine, Sheriff Paul Fitzgerald of Story County, Iowa, launched an investigation into FirstNet and possible abuse of funds. A court order was issued to obtain emails due to corruption allegations of lucrative financial giveaways. The federal government then asked the courts to block this investigation into emails of possible corruption with FirstNet, claiming it would be a risk to Homeland Security. The term Homeland Security continues to be used and abused by special interest companies in the United States in order to gain access to citizen tax dollars at the federal level and eat away at our Fourth Amendment rights of privacy. Another example of possible corruption with FirstNet federal tax dollars at the local level with regards to their sister agency, LA RICS, is when, according to Forbes magazine, Los Angeles County CEO Mr. Fujioka gave a $4 million contract of FirstNet LA RICS funds to Michael Thayer of Delta WRX for an approximate $150,000 job. When county officials complained about this fantastically gratuitous payout, Mr. Fujioka flagrantly granted yet another $1.5 million to this same company before turning around and retiring. Mr. Fujioka did all of this claiming LA County officials had no control over him or to whom he distributed all this LA RICS federal grant money to. The LA County Board of Supervisors have since called for an investigation, but that's not stopping the water spigot of federal citizen tax dollars that still pours into this corrupt and carcinogenic surveillance program. Who's really the big winner here? Motorola was gifted with an approximate $280 million contract out of our tax money, for which, according to Fierce Wireless magazine, an additional $500 million of our local tax funds will be added to the Motorola coffers down the road to help pay for this infrastructure. This cash cow recipient of federal and now even local tax dollars, Motorola, also happens to be named as a little-known defendant in multiple cell phone brain cancer lawsuits in Washington, D.C., that are now in their 16th year of litigation. Motorola has been accused of covering up their scientific studies that showed they had knowledge that their radiation-emitting products and infrastructures could cause cancer and genotoxic effects. Yet, they're still going after our tax money and purposely not talking about the studies that they funded that show these serious illnesses from their radiation-emitting products and infrastructures. One way to fight this rollout is if you live in a city that is incorporated, you can ask for exorbitant fees to put these towers on your property. This tactic has already been proven successful in many cities in Los Angeles County. If you are not in a city and are just part of the county, like our community, you may or may not be able to use this tactic. Demand a public hearing and due process and ask them to protect your health, life, property, and privacy, which are your basic constitutional rights anyway. Other tactics being used to stop cell towers by communities in Europe is having residents take blood tests prior to the cell tower's installation and then test the blood again at a later date to show the cell aberrations and the harm that the cell towers cause the community. Tell them you're putting them on legal notice and that they will be held accountable. These cell tower agencies will also claim exemption to your local environmental laws, but they're actually not exempt from NEPA. Any NEPA report in your area should include the Department of the Interior's report on cell towers killing birds, wildlife, and foliage. There's also language in NEPA pertaining to economic loss which properties in the vicinity of these cell towers will suffer. But most importantly, the Telecom Act, which states you can't use environmental or health concerns to block a cell tower, actually flies in the face of the United States Constitution, which states that you've got a right to health, life, and property, which the cell tower and the Telecom Act would trample on. You also have a right to freedom of speech, which the Telecom Act attempts to stifle by saying you can't use health or environmental effects to block a cell tower. At our community meeting in Topanga, Motorola, LA Ricks, and other telecom industry companies who stand to benefit from this enormous taxpayer-funded giveaway told us that there's no health effects from cell tower radiation. That is an absolute deadly misrepresentation of the science to what they hope will be an uneducated community. Many communities all over the world develop cancer clusters within just a few years of being exposed to this dangerous toxic radiation that our government, along with the wireless industry, is telling us is safe. India has lowered their radiation emission levels substantially after cancer clusters popped up around cell towers. China has even removed cell towers, but the United States? Nothing. The LA Ricks health representative, who is actually just a paid industry shill, also touted that both the FCC and the FDA have deemed the radiation to be safe. Yet upon closer examination, that statement also turns out to be incorrect. In actuality, the FDA website clearly states, under the law, the FDA does not review the safety of radiation-emitting consumer products, such as cell phones and similar wireless devices, before they can be sold, as it does with new drugs or medical devices. And this is what the FCC is charged with as an agency. There is not one employee within the FCC who is a doctor that specializes in radiofrequency radiation, nor is that agency charged with public health and safety. It's not even in their jurisdiction. The FCC has no jurisdiction whatsoever for health and safety with regard to radiation or any toxin, and the FDA blatantly states that they do not currently review the safety of wireless products. So we're left having to believe whatever the FCC tells us on this issue by whomever has provided that information to them. Well, being as the chairman of the FCC is Tom Wheeler, ex-CEO of the CTIA, the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association, and ex-president of the NTCA, National Cable and Telecommunications Association, both of which are the biggest lobbying firms in the United States for the wireless industry, we can only assume that there may be at least a little conflict of interest with regard to where the FCC actually gets their information on health and safety from wireless devices and infrastructures. These two statements from the FDA and FCC's websites create the perfect environment for absolutely zero health and safety regulations and oversight with regards to these emissions. These corporations that are lobbying Congress for our tax dollars are robbing us blind while harming us with their products and surveilling us, all in the name of Homeland Security. Everyone wants to live in a safe America, but surveilling endlessly and killing us slowly with carcinogenic and genotoxic radiation should not be forced on us under the abused premise of Homeland Security, and is certainly anything but safe. If you live in any of the states mentioned on this video, your area is currently being targeted for these cell towers. Other areas of the United States may be next if we don't move fast. There are thousands of articles about the abuse of federal tax funds and our money given away to private corporations under the smart meter program. It's happening again now with this new FirstNet federal cell tower infrastructure. If FirstNet gets too bad of a name, they may actually change that name to something else. But don't be fooled. Stand up to FirstNet and stand up for health, safety, and life. For more information, you can go to these websites to upload documents and get armed with factually correct information on the science. Thank you for taking action and being proactive about protecting yours and your community's constitutional rights to health, life, property, and privacy.